Hi everyone, Herson here. Welcome to the first installment of my video guides to Civ 6 multiplayer. Today, we'll be covering how to play the early game with a classic commercial hub-less Magnus Internals opener. We'll be going over how to spend your governor titles, how to path through the tech tree, and what to produce in your cities in the early game. Some caveats. This opening is designed for non-religious, non-naval civs. This guide will primarily be focusing on the free-for-all meta with the better balanced game and better balanced starts mods, and as such, not everything will be applicable to teamers games and games played without those mods. Lastly, this guide assumes you are not under pressure from aggressive neighbors. With all that said, let's get right into it. First things first, why is this the meta opener? In Civilization 6, culture and science are everything. These are the yields which allow you to actually steamroll other players and actually pursue victory conditions. However, there are two major disincentives to building science infrastructure in the early game. 1. The cost of all districts and buildings scales with the number of technologies you have researched. The more techs you've completed, the more expensive a commercial hub or a monument will be. 2. The Eureka system heavily incentivizes you to pace yourself. By focusing on expanding your empire and maximizing your production instead of on growing your science early, you will easily be able to hit most Eurekas in the tech tree. Players who neglect expansion and production in the early game, building campuses and libraries instead of settlers, commercial hubs, and trade routes, will find themselves struggling to hit Eurekas, and subsequently not actually gaining a real tech lead. Because of this, Civ players have learned to prioritize this opener focused on commercial hubs, the Governor Magnus, and internal trade routes. It prioritizes food, production, and gold above all else. By maximizing these stats in the early game and waiting until the mid game to build out your science infrastructure, you end up being able to slingshot past players who greedily overemphasize science in the early game. Before we begin, let's examine the tech tree for a bit. The primary goal of this opener is to get to the currency technology and start placing down your commercial hubs as early as possible. This requires the pottery and writing technologies. However, there are some other considerations to make, notably animal husbandry, mining, and irrigation. Depending on your spawn, you may decide you want to pick up one of these technologies before rushing directly to currency. However, bear this in mind, the cost of building new districts scales with the number of technologies you have researched. The more you dilly-dally and grab unnecessary technologies, the more expensive your commercial hubs will be. Do you have a spawn with many flat, empty tiles? Consider grabbing animal husbandry to reveal horses and increase your yields. Do you have many luxury resources that require mines or quarries? Mining is the technology for you. Is your spawn overflowing with plantationable resources such as citrus or coffee? It may be worth making a detour for irrigation. And, of course, your Pantheon will play a big role in these decisions. If you choose the Open Sky Pantheon for bonus culture on pastures, you should of course be rushing animal husbandry to take advantage of that. With that out of the way, let's move on to the actual start of the game. The standard opener for your capital city will be producing 2 scouts followed by 2 settlers. The scouts serve 3 primary purposes in the early game. 1. To generate era score by finding huts and meeting players, securing your first golden age. 2. To meet city-states. And 3. To scout out the locations for your future cities. Ideally, your first 2 expansions should be settled on fresh water, with 2 or equivalent tiles in their first ring. You should usually open with a monument in these 2 cities, as the early culture is invaluable for earning the governor titles and reaching your first government for this build as quickly as possible. The exception is that you may sometimes opt to make a builder first. This is usually only done if you have a pantheon which buffs tile improvements that city could make. For example, Goddess of Festivals for bonus culture on plantations. In these cases, you will typically create a builder first, followed by a monument second. After finishing its second settler, your capital city has a choice for what to build next. A monument, which is always a safe choice, a builder, which is good if you have spots for good tile improvements, a campus, or another settler. Usually, you will wait until you have completed the early Empire Civic before making your third settler. You want the bonus 50% production towards settlers from the policy card it provides. Building a campus is often the best move if you have room for a +3 or better campus, and rarely a good idea otherwise. The +3 breakpoint is hugely impactful, as it means your campus will be granting you 3 era score when completed. This makes hitting your first golden age far easier. If the campus would only have 2 adjacency, you'd probably be better off building a monument instead. 2 culture is usually better than 2 science in the early game. Next, let's dive into the namesake of this opening, Magnus. With the commercial hub opener, you will always be choosing Magnus as your first governor, and typically, but not always, establish him in your capital. Magnus is built to be the perfect first governor. First off, he gives 50% extra yields from all resource harvesting and feature removals in the city he's built in. This is an amazing bonus that'll come in handy later. His first right-hand promotion grants +2 production on all internal trade routes sent to the city, as well as causing settlers training the city to not cost population. This is the first promotion you'll want to grab on him. His first left-hand promotion grants +2 food on internal trade routes, as well as extra settler movement. This is the second promotion you'll be grabbing on him. You generally want to save 80 gold in the early game so that you can buy your first trader in your second city and then send it to your capital. The yields will initially be 1 food and 1 production, but we will be increasing those shortly. It's important that you get this trade route up early enough to trigger the Eureka for currency. Once you have unlocked currency, every city, except your capital if it opened with a campus, will place down their commercial hub immediately. The reason for this is simple. Every tech and civic you complete increases the cost of all districts for the rest of the game. However, when you place down a district to begin construction, the price is locked in. This means that even if you don't actually start building the district until several turns later, the price will not increase. After placing the district to lock in the price, you can feel free to complete any half-finished monuments, settlers, or builders, and then start production on the commercial hub afterwards. Whichever city you put Magnus in, usually your capital, should always be ready to build a government plaza once it reaches 4 population. To explain why, I'll have to explain how internal trade route yields are calculated. Baseline, all internal trade routes grant +1 food and +1 production. However, every district completed in the destination city increases those yields. The yield increase varies by district and are as follows. Campuses, holy sites, theater squares, entertainment complexes, and water parks increase the food yield of internal trade routes by 1. Industrial zones, commercial hubs, encampments, and harbors increase the production yield of trade routes by 1. The government plaza and diplomatic quarter are unique in that these 2 districts increase both food and production by 1. This is the reason you want your government plaza in your Magnus city. You are going to be stacking the increased internal trade route yields from Magnus's promotions with the extra internal trade route yields from the government plaza. An example of a good early game internal trade route is as follows. It is sent to a city with Magnus, which has a commercial hub and a government plaza. Adding together all of the bonuses I've listed previously, it'll grant +4 food and +5 production. Excellent for rapidly growing a new city. Once you've gotten your commercial hubs finished, you're good to go. The demands of your spawn will vary, but the gist is the same every time. Nearly all of your expansions from turn 30 to 40 will be producing commercial hubs, markets, traders, or settlers. The goal is to send 1 trade route from every single city to your Magnus city in order to rapidly grow your empire. That just about wraps up the content of this video. In my next video, I'll be covering Golden Age dedications, the importance of early culture, and how to use the feudalism civic to pivot out of the early game and grow your stats explosively in the mid game. Check out the description of the video for a link to my Twitch, where I can be found streaming many of my Civ games live. Be sure to subscribe, like the video, and let me know in the comments if there's anything else you'd like to see. See you in the next one!